is looking a picture. It was a great game of football. Perth, to their credit, guys, aimed up for a dead rubber as far as they were concerned. Queensland, how good were they, Paul?
They were very impressive again. I think they've been the most impressive team in this last quarter of the season, definitely. And they've finally found that cutting edge, haven't they? They look like they're capable of scoring all the time. They've always played beautiful football. I mean, they've been one of the teams I've loved to watch, but they always seem to lack that bit right at the death. But the form Van Dijk's in at the moment, and Mitch Nichols is a handy little foil. The wing play, it's just, there's so much to love about Queensland, and when you've got someone like Miller who can come on with that sort of guile, we'll see a couple of examples of it, and he was brilliant.
Yeah, he's superb, and although I must say in the first 20 minutes of the game I thought Perth controlled it quite well, and I think they counteracted the Queensland width with both the right midfield, Bullock and Neville, as well as Pellegrino and Sekulovsky on the left-hand side. They occupied the space and they showed Queensland in, and I thought they struggled to break them down, and they really controlled the game.
It's interesting with Queensland, it's hard to contain it for 90 minutes though, isn't it?
Yeah, that's exactly right. Yeah, it is. It is to maintain the discipline. Also, they're incredibly fit. Queensland incredibly fit playing in those conditions, and being able to lift the tempo as they then did to equalise at 1-1 after Perth went ahead, and then to run away with it.
Yeah, what does it say about the psychology of Queensland? And you just touched on it there. They gave away 2 soft goals and still managed to bounce back. And moreover, this horrible home form is now a thing of the past. 5 games at home, wins on the bounce. What does this say about their psychology?
Well, I think it's down to the coach. I remember speaking to Frank Farina earlier in the season about this home ground hoodoo, and it just wasn't anywhere in his mind. It didn't matter. He didn't even recognise it, and I'm sure that was the message he was giving to the players. And at no stage, even in the early part of the season when they weren't converting their chances, was he concerned, because they were doing the right things.
Yeah, it's the football they were playing.
Yeah,
and,
that's
and
right.
So often the talk is get the football right and then the results will come, and he was a big believer in that, and every single player who you heard talk about it said the same thing. They said they would be more concerned if they weren't playing good football.
It was certainly a line that was rolled out a lot of times by the man you mentioned, Frank Farina. Some of those post-match interviews, how he fronted up when his team butchered so many points, but that is certainly something behind them. Before we focus more on Queensland, just a word on Perth. There was a lot of surprise that Nikita Rukavica played because of the deal that was looming with FC20, and that deal has gone through. He's having a medical virtually as we speak in Holland, and the transfer fee is in the vicinity of $700,000 for the Perth Glory. So more good business done by an A-League club, and goes without saying we wish Nikita Rukavica all the very best on the next stage of his career. Well, that's a left footer at the front of a formation at the start of his career. What about a left footer at the rear of a formation at the end of his career? Danny Tiardo, a comment.
Oh, he's been superb, hasn't he? I mean, the way he scored that goal, that cross was brilliant, and what a save by Valapi, I've got to mention that. But, I mean, you just saw so many of the assets that Danny Tiardo brings to your team, and the way he's finished this goal just capped off a wonderful night for him. And then we saw this incident which he received the yellow card.
This has generated a lot of discussion, Kim, on this. My first reaction, and remains my reaction, it should have been play on. A lot of people think he should have been carded as he was for intent. What do you think?
Yeah, I favour the latter opinion. I think it was the manner in which he went for the ball that was potentially dangerous, despite the fact that he did get the ball. It's like a tackle from behind. It's not acceptable any longer.
They've made no secret of the fact that they're trying to discourage that type of tackle, because Danny Tiardo is very good at it, obviously, and he won the ball on that occasion. But I think if that starts becoming the norm in games, then all of a sudden, if people start, you only have to mistime a couple of those, and then you can hurt people.
How much of Danny Tiardo's history, which isn't good, I'm not defending that, but how much of his history went into a perception that that was going to be a bad tackle? Because it was clean as a whistle in my book.
Significant amounts, yeah. I mean, had it been another player, I think there would have been less chance.
A little bit like the comment we made about Daniel going down for the penalty kick. I think it's the same sort of thing. You get that sort of... And we saw Danny Allsop a couple of weeks ago perhaps not get the sanction because of the way he goes about the game. So there's definitely an element to that.
What about the move of Matt Mackay, ostensibly from left midfield, where he's played most of his A-League football, more into a defensive holding role? How do you think that worked?
I think that's one of the real advantages for Queensland, is their adaptability through midfield. Mackay's a wonderful player. He's very smart player, he's a good distributor, and that left side is such an advantage, and he could fall into that hole. He looked very comfortable there.
Yeah, I think that the manner in which Frank can move those key players, including Danny Tiardo, into the middle of the park or into a defensive role, gives him enormous flexibility in terms of bringing other players into the game, like Zulo Minakon, or is another player who can also add something and be a match winner. But across the back, they're very stable, And one would imagine.
So where would you play Thiago? Would you keep him at left back, or would you have him in that? Because Frank obviously brought him out here with the intention of having him that holding midfield role, didn't he? But that display he produced on the weekend, and the delivery, he's got such good passing ability, which is something you don't always equate with Danny Thiago. Everyone knows about his willingness to do the work, get the tackles in, but that distribution was superb.
No, it's fantastic, and I up until that weekend, up until the game on the weekend, I wouldn't have hesitated but to have him in the middle of the park. But having seen him in that sort of form, that irrepressible form, the sort of form he showed as a youngster, if he can do that, I mean, he can win the competition for Queensland. There's no doubt about it, because he can come from deep, and his distribution is outstanding. His aggression is fantastic. And he's playing with a lot of confidence and belief. And as you saw from the celebration,
he's a very
his
popular
players love
player
him.
in the team.
They obviously love him.
He's also playing with injury. We shouldn't ignore this. He's got a bung shoulder and he's got broken bones in his feet, and he's turning up football like that. It's a real testament, and perhaps that speaks even greater volumes for Queensland's claims on the titles, albeit they're going to have to do it from third place. This was an interesting situation. Queensland's first goal came from a situation of an injured player. And Danny Thiago decided to play on. Later in the game, Anthony Skorich goes down. Danny Thiago plays the sportsmanship card and kicks the ball out. At what point and how do players decide when it's time to play on and time to be a sport in inverted commas?
I think it sums up, depending on what the state of the game is at any given time. I think if you're winning the game and you're comfortable, then perhaps you stop it. If you're chasing the game, then you want to get on with it. And you know in the back of your mind that the referee is the ultimate adjudicator. Should be. Because
isn't it the case, Kim, on that players, because of player etiquette that's developed, have taken these decisions upon themselves? And I don't think that's a fair thing.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's not a matter for the player, really. If players choose to do that, just as Adam Gilchrist chooses to walk, that's fine. And that may be a personal way in which they go about playing the game. But in this case, I thought Danny was well within his rights to continue to play. The ball was in open field, and it didn't appear to me as if it was life-threatening or placing the players.
And initially, it looked as though the players were getting up. I think Matt Mackay actually got up, but I think initially Pellegrino looked like he was getting up as well.
Yeah. So,
Paul, have Queensland shown enough to you that even though they're in third place, they can win the competition?
Definitely shown enough that they can win it. I think it's going to be very hard. I'm a real advocate for finishing in the top two. I think that's the safest bet to make sure you win a grand final. It's tough. They'll get the home ground advantage in one of the games, but then they've got to travel to either Melbourne or Adelaide and get over the line twice. It's going to be very hard. Well,
their away form has been the best in the competition, so I guess, given all the hurdles in front of them, Queensland's best equipped of the two, them and the Central Coast, to spring that surprise. History certainly goes with you. Two teams who won't be figuring in the finals. They certainly can't win it because of that. They've had very poor seasons. Sydney and Newcastle at the football stadium. 4-0 in favour of the Sky Blues, Kim on. Is this an indication of what might have been for Sydney?
It's difficult to know, isn't it, really? There didn't seem to be a lot to play for on the weekend. I know Cozzy would like to finish the season in a positive frame of mind, and to see his youngsters do well and build on some late season momentum, but really it was pretty well over a while ago for Sydney, even though they were mathematically still in with a chance. I think that was the one game on the weekend where there wasn't a great deal at stake, and therefore to expect a fantastic spectacle was perhaps thinking it's...
I mean, that sort of game, I mean, if you're really going to judge players, or you want to see them under pressure, you want to see them when there's things at stake, and there was 20 odd games before that where really that's when you were sorting people out. I think the players went out there. Yeah, it's nice to win the last game of the season, ended on a high, but I don't think we'll be putting too much stock in.
What about the Newcastle players, though?
I mean, I just want to pick on that, Kellen, because you said there's nothing to play for, and as far as season 4 of the A-League's concerned, there wasn't anything to play for Newcastle, other than a small thing that's approaching called the Asian Champions League. Players trying to get in the line of sight of the coach to force their way into a starting position. How bad was some of this play from Newcastle?
Yeah, they looked totally distracted, if you like. I know there's a couple of players in that lineup who have their minds elsewhere. They want away from the club, or they're looking at prospective transfers. And obviously when confidence is down, and all of a sudden you only have to be off your game in terms of your concentration, for a little bit, and things go against you. And I mean, Sydney on the day, once they got the first one, they said, well, hang on, we're having a good day here, we're up for it. And Newcastle
defending
just
from
fell
Newcastle,
away.
It's virtually at walking pace. So there's no pride in protecting their line at all. I'm sure Gary Van Egmond, from whom we'll hear in a moment, was absolutely ropeable about this. A lot of talk around the Newcastle team about Anton Kovacic and Kasper Tafta not getting enough time to show themselves. Did they do their cause any good at all on the weekend?
Well, I think not. I think there's been so much conjecture about who should be playing, who shouldn't be playing, why aren't certain people playing. And I've always been a big believer that, to me, looking from the outside, if I see guys that aren't playing a lot, I think, well, there's obviously a reason. I go, it doesn't make a lot of sense for coaches to leave out the best players week after week. I mean, that doesn't make sense to me. So obviously there's a reason why that's happening. And I think in the case
but also
of
often
these guys...
Yeah, possibly, but also often in those situations, individuals will try and impress with either their individual skills and not perhaps think so much of the take responsibility for the broader team result, and that can often affect the way in which players go about playing in those sorts of games if they're casting their minds forward to perhaps being figuring in the next season's squad.
Okay, well, the focus for Newcastle most certainly is the Asian Champions League. They've got a lot of work to do to get ready for that competition, as Gary Van Egmond updated after the game, and here's where things are at as far as recruitment's concerned for the Newcastle Jets.
What we need to do is a case of knowing which players are leaving. Is Mark Milligan leaving? Is Ante Kovic leaving? Is Joel Griffiths leaving? And then in Julie we need to get new players in. Jesper Harkinson is going to leave the club. So there's probably 6 to 7 positions coming up which we need to fill, which are not just squad players but basis players. We need to get some injury replacement players for the likes of Jessic and for Hoffman as well to come in. Noel Spencer is another one where we can get a replacement player in for him as well. So yeah, we've got a lot of work to do in a very short period of time, and hopefully if everyone pulls together we'll be able to do it.
Jets boss Gary Van Egmond, they're not so much talking about window dressing for his Champions League squad, but root and branch changes. So if you're a Newcastle Jets fan, what do you take out of this?
Oh, they have the task ahead of them, don't they? There's little for them to grasp in terms of being optimistic about the games ahead in the Champions League.
One of the problems is normally when a team loses a couple of players, then you say, okay, we've got to target that position to solve that problem. With Newcastle, if you looked at their team now, which would you say would be the positions that are definite starters for those Champions League?
Well, Nikolai Topor-Stanley has been signed by the club, but as we saw at the top of the show, he's been linked with Ulsan Hyundai, one of Newcastle's opponents at the group stage. How do you balance the business interests of buying and selling players with building and having integrity in your competition and your squad for a competition?
Well, the problem is the integrity comes from success. And I think when you've had a successful season like they did and they won the league and they featured in the finals in the previous 2 seasons, that builds something about the club that people start looking at it. All of a sudden, if you disrespect that and you start, lock, stock and barrel, everybody's moving on, all of a sudden you're going to lose that. So all of a sudden business down the track is going to be hard to come by as well.
All right, well, that's our wrap of round 21 of season 4 of the Hyundai A-League. The finals to come. We can't wait for those. After the break, Carter tomorrow evening. It's going to be a fabulous experience watching this, I think, even though it's not